we have proof that the British establishment doesn't give a toss about Diane Abbott or anti-black racism. I know, shocking, right? Now, in a discussion about her, she stood up 46 times to participate, only for Lindsay Hoyle to ignore her in a discussion about her own abuse. This is disgusting, and there is no way this wasn't deliberate. Now, Lindsay Hoyle's excuse was because Diane wasn't on the order paper. Well, that would have some weight to it, but Ed Davey was called, and yet he wasn't on the order paper. But even if that was a rule speakers adhere to, I think that would be incredibly inappropriate to not make an exception. Then the excuse changed to, well, we ran out of time. If only there was an individual who had the power to call MPs for a question and was in charge of how long it went on for. Oh, that's right, the Speaker does. I also love how he's appealing to parliamentary protocols for not calling up Diane Abbott, but he didn't seem to care about them to save Starmer in the SNP ceasefire motion. Very interesting. Pathetic excuses for a pathetic individual. Just think about this for a second. We have a room full of mostly white men talking about sexist and racist abuse about an MP in that very room, and she wasn't allowed to speak. It's incredible. I mean, given that the discussion was about a sitting MP, being the Speaker, of course, Diane Abbott wanting to make a statement or asking a question is going to be on your mind. There's no way he forgot. Now, it seems that Ed Balls, an individual I'm not particularly fond of, appeared to have said the quiet part out loud.
You have two men who are not directly affected by what was said about the woman who wants to make a point about how she was affected, and she's not asked to intervene or to contribute.
Personally, I like the Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle. I think he's a good man. I thought it was shocking yesterday what happened. It is entirely in his discretion. It would be normal for him to call backbenchers from the backbenchers who are standing like that, and it would be very usual for him to call somebody who is so in the news in that way. Let's be honest, Rishi Sunak didn't want him to call Diane Abbott because it would then kind of focus that debate about the terrible racist language towards her. Keir Starmer, though, probably didn't want her to be called either.
Because she would criticise him, as she went on to do in The Independent.
That's right. And also because, because at the moment she's suspended from being a Labour MP in Parliament, and therefore he didn't know what she would say. And the Speaker, we know, a week or so ago, got into a lot of trouble with both main parties, well, in particular with the Conservatives and the SNP, for the way he handled that debate about Gaza. And so I think this was, I'm afraid, a Speaker doing something which he thought would be popular with the Leader of the Opposition and with the Prime Minister, two men, as you said, and not calling the woman who is in the spotlight for terrible racist behaviour. And I think it was a bad day.
As always, discussions around abuse, around racism, are just performative. I mean, they don't care, do they? When it comes down to it, they don't want to address the actual issues. And once again, Lindsay Hoyle has protected Keir Starmer. Diane has never shied away from attacking her own party, especially on anti-black racism and the abuse she suffered at the hands of the Labour right. And Keir Starmer knew she would have said something either about him or the party, and he didn't want to be embarrassed. So Hoyle made sure she couldn't speak. Just like the ceasefire motion, Lindsay Hoyle has put aside real, meaningful discussion in favour of party political politics. Now, according to Owen Jones on Twitter, there was a brief conversation between Starmer and Diane, which was overheard. Keir Starmer approached Diane Abbott. Conversation overhead went like this. Let me know if there's anything I can do. You could restore the whip. I understand. Just let me know if there's anything. Restore the whip. I understand. This was actually confirmed by Diane herself. If Starmer gave a shit, she'd have the whip back. It's been 11 months since the whip was removed. Now, yes, the letter was pat, but she apologised straight away, and we can see the point she was trying to make. It was just made poorly. Yet the first ever female black MP isn't in the PLP. But Steve Reid, who was currently in the Shadow Cabinet, said on TV yesterday that Diane shouldn't have the whip back. Now, I'd be quiet if I were you, Steve, because back in 2020, Steve made an anti-Semitic dog whistle against a Jewish Tory donor, asking whether he is the puppet master for the Tory cabinet. Now, what happened to him? He wasn't punished. No whip was taken, no suspension. He said sorry, and that was it. And there are countless examples of white Labour right figures, which I've covered before, of their terrible behaviour, only for them to either face no discipline or have their whip restored. And if it couldn't get any worse, Labour are trying to capitalise on Diane's abuse. This was an email sent to members asking for donations. This is disgraceful. The Tory party's biggest donor, Frank Hester, has been exposed for making racist comments. You can find what he's alleged to have said yourself. It's all over the news. We are fuming. £10 million in their election fund from this man, and they're not giving it back. A huge amount of money adding to their already huge financial advantage. They're so desperate to cling on to power that they'll happily ignore the racism, cover their ears, and spend every penny. We need to cancel it out. Unlike the Tories, our campaigns rely on small donations from thousands of working people who all want to see a better future for Britain and know that the only way that can happen is with a Labour government. That's why we're asking you today if you can chip into our general election campaign fund. The Tories won't return the tainted £10 million, and it makes it all the more difficult for us to beat the Tories in the next general election. Their pockets are deep, but if you donate today, you can help us make real strides to close the huge funding gap between us and the Tories. I'm sorry, but that is just so rotten. It's really gross stuff. And it's so transparent that they don't care. If the Labour Party cared, if they cared about restorative justice, then that is giving the whip back to Diane Abbott. The entire political landscape is a hotbed of racism. Parliament is full of racists. Political parties are full of them. Media figures, the lot. And instead of the right thing happening, Lindsay Hoyle, once again being a corrupt piece of shit that he is, made sure it didn't happen. And he should resign immediately. Now, I've just found out that according to Lee Harpin, who is close to the Labour right, Labour have apparently offered Diane Abbott the whip back on one condition. My understanding of the Diane Abbott situation is a compromise deal could be reached whereby she has the whip restored at some point, while she also rules out standing again in Hackney at the election. No secret that at least 4 people already seeking to become candidate in seat. If this is true, and I do want to say if, since it's not confirmed, then what is the point in restoring the whip if she has to stand down anyway? Why is Diane Abbott being treated differently to anyone else? So off the back of the racist abuse Diane has faced, if this is true, Starmer may now be trying to force her out of Parliament, which is shameful. The Labour Party has tolerated anti-black racism for years. They allowed the right-wing faction to say the most viscerally disgusting things about Diane Abbott, but nothing happened to them because they weren't on the left. Now they're using her abuse for political gain, and it looks like, potentially, they may be trying to oust her from Parliament. People should absolutely not vote Labour because they are an anti-black, racist party. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you like and drop a comment. It's good for the algorithm and I'm interested in what you have to say. If you're not already subscribed, please do and hit the notification bell. You can also support this channel by becoming a member for 99p per month. And if you're feeling a little more generous, then you can support us on Patreon for £3 or £5 per month. This channel for a while has been uploading every single day, and it's quite a lot of work that is still voluntary and scheduled around my paid work. But I have so much ambition, expect in the future to see more variety in content, such as interviews and Vox Pops. But I want this to be a fully fledged media organisation where not only is this my full-time job, but to have multiple people working for Turn Left. I like to see a live show in the future, more content that delves into culture, history, and much more. But that can only be done if there's money. So please, if you can, support us in any way that's in your capacity. And thank you to existing members, subscribers, and patrons. See you next time.